The economic consequences of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine have moved from theoretical forecasts to a tangible reality for millions of Russians. And boy, is it a bitter reality. A nation that withstood the initial shock of Western sanctions now faces a deepening internal financial crisis. Galloping inflation, a crumbling currency, and shortages of everything from imported machinery to basic food staple. The Kremlin's projection of economic stability and sovereign resilience is being severely tested. Or, rather, it's collapsing spectacularly, while Putin tries to convince everyone that everything is under control. Spoiler alert, it's not. The crisis is no longer confined to boring macroeconomic indicators that only economists understand. It's reflected in the anxiety of consumers finding empty shelves, in the desperation of manufacturers who can't source components, and in the long-term strategic calculations of a government that's financing an endless war. Because sure, why worry about your people's well-being when you can keep sending tanks to Ukraine? The most visceral symptom for the average citizen is food inflation. Annual food inflation consistently runs in double digits, with staple items like sugar, eggs, and vegetables doubling their prices in many regions over the past year. The cost of a standard grocery basket has skyrocketed, eroding purchasing power despite repeated hikes in pensions and public sector wages. It's the classic game of chasing your own tail. Prices go up, wages go up, prices go up more. A vicious cycle worthy of an economic reality show. The official inflation rate, acknowledged by the State Statistics Service, masks even sharper localized increases, especially in remote areas far from major distribution centers. This price surge is driven by a perfect storm of factors: a severely weakened ruble, making imports more expensive; logistical chaos from disrupted global supply chains; and protectionist government policies aimed at ensuring domestic supply, but which often distort markets. Meanwhile, farmers and producers face their own crisis, contending with a lack of imported seeds, breeding stock, and agricultural machinery parts formerly sourced from Europe and America. This threatens future harvests and long-term food security. But hey, at least Putin can say Russia is self-sufficient, even if that means his people have to eat potatoes for the next 10 years. The story of the Russian ruble is a central drama in this financial unraveling. After an initial catastrophic collapse in early 2022, the currency staged a surprising recovery, buoyed by capital controls, forced conversion of foreign currency earnings by exporters, and crucially, still robust revenues from oil and gas. However, this artificial stability has fractured. The ruble has lost over half its value against the US dollar since the beginning of the war, hitting multi-year lows and showing persistent volatility. The fundamental pillars of its strength have eroded. While oil revenues remain significant, they're constrained by an internationally enforced price cap and a costly shadow fleet of tankers needed to circumvent sanctions. The cost of imports, however, has ballooned due to the sanctions premium. The higher costs associated with sourcing goods through third countries like Turkey, Kazakhstan, and China, and securing shipping and insurance through opaque middlemen. This has created a devastating imbalance, draining foreign currency reserves. It's like trying to fill a bathtub while the drain is completely open. Good luck with that, Vlad. The government and the Central Bank of Russia are engaged in a difficult balancing act with diverging priorities. The central bank, in a drastic move, hiked its key interest rate to a staggering 16% in late 2023 and has held it there. A clear emergency response aimed at curbing inflation and propping up the currency by making ruble savings more attractive. However, these high borrowing costs stifle any hope of meaningful investment in the civilian economy, crushing business loans for expansion and innovation. Conversely, the government's fiscal policy is overwhelmingly geared towards financing the war machine. Military and security spending now consumes over 6% of GDP, a Soviet-era level, and when combined with social payments to placate the population, has led to a yawning budget deficit. This deficit is being covered by drawing down the National Welfare Fund and increasing domestic borrowing, effectively cannibalizing the country's future savings for present-day conflict. The economy is thus pulled in two directions: a central bank trying to cool it down, and a government pumping it with militarized stimulant. It's like having two drivers in a car, one hitting the brakes and the other flooring the gas. Guess who's going to win? Spoiler: nobody. The social consequences of this economic squeeze are profound but diffuse, unfolding in a tightly controlled society where overt protest is swiftly crushed. There's no mass starvation or breadline chaos reminiscent of the 1990s, but a gradual, grinding decline in living standards and quality of life. Real, disposable incomes, after a brief rise, are stagnating or falling for many. The brain drain that began with the mobilization of September 2022 continues as young, educated professionals seek opportunities abroad, creating a long-term human capital crisis. In regional industrial cities, the picture is darker. Many factories are reconfigured for military production, creating jobs, but at the expense of a diversified economy. Others, dependent on imported parts or foreign partnerships, have slowed or shuttered, leading to underemployment. Consumer choice has narrowed dramatically. Western brands are largely gone, replaced often by lower quality domestic alternatives or overpriced imports from friendly nations. The psychological impact is one of lowered expectations and a retreat into subsistence and informal networks. Historically, the Russian state and its people have endured immense economic hardship, from the post-Soviet shock therapy of the 90s to the crises of 1998, 2008, and the earlier sanctions following the 2014 annexation of Crimea. This history has bred a certain resilience and a low threshold for economic expectations among older generations. The Kremlin's narrative heavily leverages this, framing current difficulties as yet another chapter in the nation's eternal struggle against a hostile West, thereby mobilizing a sense of patriotic endurance. Putin's basically saying, "Remember when things were worse? Well, now they're bad again, but it's the West's fault, not mine." Classic authoritarian move. However, analysts note critical differences this time. The sanctions are far more comprehensive, cutting off access to advanced technology and financial market, not just for the state, but for entire swaths of industry. The economy is now cut off from the very sources of modernization and growth, Western investment, technology, and expertise that helped it recover from previous downturns. The war itself is an active, all-consuming drain, unlike the frozen conflict that followed 2014. The previous model of a resource-exporting economy integrated into global market, albeit contentiously, is irreparably broken, and no new stable model has yet emerged. Internationally, the Russian economy's performance is a key front in the wider geopolitical confrontation. Western nations, particularly the United States and the European Union, are closely monitoring the effectiveness of their sanctions regime, seeking signs of critical strain that could alter the Kremlin's strategic calculus. The gradual erosion of Russia's financial buffers and its forced pivot to a war economy is seen as a strategic success, albeit a slow-moving one. However, Russia's deepening economic ties with China, India, Iran, and other neutral or friendly states demonstrate the limitations of isolation. Trade with China has hit record levels, and the yuan has largely replaced the dollar and euro in Russia's international transactions. Yet, this relationship is asymmetrical. China is a dominant buyer of Russian energy at a discount and a seller of goods ranging from cars to machine tools, but it does not provide the high-tech semiconductors or precision manufacturing equipment that Russia's defense and aerospace sectors desperately need. The internal adaptations, while forestalling immediate collapse, are reshaping the Russian economy in profound and likely permanent ways. A state-driven military Keynesianism has become the dominant economic model, with defense and security spending exceeding 6% of GDP and accounting for over a third of the entire federal budget. Resources are being forcibly redirected on a scale not seen since the Cold War. Entire factories that once produced civilian goods are now repurposed to manufacture everything from artillery shells to uniform. The economy is not just sanctioned, it is being systematically downgraded to a less complex, more primitive state. This reality is forging a new, fragile social contract between the Kremlin and the population. In the absence of ideological fervor or widespread genuine support for the war, the state's legitimacy is increasingly underpinned by a promise of material stability. The unspoken bargain is clear: political quiescence in exchange for economic survival. Dissent is criminalized under harsh new laws, while state media tirelessly amplifies narratives of external siege and historic mission. The risk for the Kremlin is that this bargain hinges on its ability to maintain the flow of payment. Any sudden interruption, a sharper devaluation, a failed harvest, or an inability to pay pensions or public wages on time, could rupture this understanding, particularly in the less affluent regions, far from Moscow and St. Petersburg, because when people can't feed their families, they tend to get a bit irritable, and no amount of propaganda about Russian greatness can fill an empty stomach. What happens next is intrinsically tied to the trajectory of the war itself. The Russian state has demonstrated a high tolerance for economic pain and a formidable capacity for political control in the short to medium term. There is no indication that the current economic distress alone will force a change in strategic direction from the Kremlin. Indeed, the war is now the central organizing principle of the entire political and economic system. The world is thus witnessing not an imminent economic collapse, but the methodical transformation of a major economy into a garrison state, poorer, more isolated, less technologically advanced, and permanently on a war footing. The ultimate consequence is a Russia that poses a diminished economic threat to the global order, but a more unpredictable and militarily focused strategic challenge on its borders, its society and economy scarred and reshaped by the choices of its leadership for years to come. So congratulations, Putin. You've managed to turn Russia into a 21st century isolated fortress. The only problem is that fortresses tend to be very good at keeping people inside, but not so great at prospering. But I guess that's a problem for future Putin, not present Putin.